What's up? Because I'm a professional. Um, trying to vary those intros some. I have been getting a lot of questions on shadow work and soul retrieval, what the difference is, how they benefit people, whether you can do it alone, that sort of thing. So I want to make a little bit of a video here to explain the differences and what they do, um, so that I can just send the video out to everybody and not answer the same questions over and over in the same way. We'll start with shadow work. Shadow work is working with your shadow, which is the aspects of yourself that have been rejected or suppressed or kind of pushed back, kind of pushed out of the way. Um, you can read about the idea of the shadow self and the shadow aspects of your personality by looking up some of Jung's work. That's where we get the idea of the shadow. Now, the way that you do this work, where you go in and find these aspects of yourself and kind of bring them back and reintegrate them into who you are, the way you do that would be different for each person and different for each practitioner. Some people choose to use meditative shamanic practices to kind of go in and meet those aspects. Some people use meditation. Some people use more mainstream counseling and coaching methods to kind of take a look at, do you remember who you used to be? And how do we bring those aspects of yourself back? My office offers all of them. We try to make the different things that we do fit the person that is asking for help. The difference between shadow work and soul retrieval is they're both disassociative aspects of psychology, where you stop being connected to those aspects of yourself in both cases. With the shadow, just because you're not aware of aspects of yourself doesn't mean that those aspects are not there. They don't go away. And they often have sway over your decisions, your behaviors, the life you're currently leading, even though you're not even aware of it because you're not aware of those aspects of you anymore. One client that gave me permission to talk about her experience, she who had a lot of success from shadow work, she became an accountant, but as a child was very artistic and wanted to get into the arts, wanted to draw, wanted to paint, wanted to dance, that sort of thing. But her family was very rational, very logical, and didn't really value art in any form. So anytime she did something that was artistic, even though it made her happy if she gave it to her parents, there was this constant cultural pressure to like, oh, that's nice, kind of downplay it, not really be abusive or cruel about it, but just not really accept it either. And she learned this idea that those aspects of herself were not acceptable, so she suppressed them. And she worked more on her scientific abilities, her mathematical abilities, and like I said, eventually became an accountant. She came to me with these issues of depression, issues of not being able to connect to life, not being able to feel life, being very numb. And she was a referral from a mainstream psychologist who had sent her to me. And we did shadow work. And what that meant for her was we went back into her psyche and back into her energy field. And we found those aspects of herself that had been suppressed and brought them forward and listened to them. Usually this is how the process goes. We listen to them. We express love toward them. We accept them again. And then we reintegrate them into who we are and into our lives. And what happens is you become very powerful then. You remember, she had completely stopped being creative, other than what was good for running her household or running her job, which was not a very creative job. And for her, that became very powerful for her. She opened a second business doing artwork. And the last time I spoke to her, she told me that was what she was doing primarily at that point. So it was a total, and if I could show you before and after pictures, the vibrancy that came off of her and just the color in her. I mean, her face was different. Everything was different. And you could tell there was much more happiness there. That dullness and that numbness was gone. So that's kind of how one of the ways, and I do want to emphasize one of the ways, because everyone has a different experience with this work and what it does for them. That's one of the ways doing shadow work can help you. For me, personally, when I started doing my journey through shadow work, I was really good at being a doormat. I'm not so good at being a doormat anymore. So being able to bring the sense of personal power back to someone and help someone become powerful again, that's what shadow work really does. It also helps you face some of your, I see a lot of people with these incredible fears, sometimes even paranoias, that will become less intense or will actually disappear after doing some shadow work once they understand those things and learn how to heal those aspects. So that's shadow work. Shadow work is different from soul retrieval. Soul retrieval is, it's based on what we call shamanic techniques. I hate the S word. But what that is whenever you have a trauma, it's again, it's actually a healthy way of your psychology functioning. What happens is, in our lives, things happen, and sometimes things happen that we can't handle. We truly just can't handle. And some people have breaks and end up, on medication or in hospitals or whatever, and no judgment. Sometimes that's part of a person's journey too. And we hope that they have as quick of a recovery as possible. Some people blank it out of their memory, which is a way of handling it. Dissociative way of handling it. I can talk. Some people will have aspects of their soul, who they are, literally break off, become entangled in that mess. And sometimes those pieces continue to develop on their own. You start to see split personality issues, dissociative disorders, things like that. And what we do with soul retrieval work is we go back and find those soul pieces in those experiences. We bring those soul pieces back and we reintegrate them into the energy field. Okay? So, can you do that on your own? Both of them you can technically do on your own. Here's the thing that you need to be aware of with that. These things can be incredibly emotional, especially in cases of soul retrieval, and I actually do not suggest you do soul retrieval work on your own. Depending on who you are and what the situation is, some people can do shadow work on their own and it's safe and it's effective and everything is lovely. What happens with soul retrieval is, first off, there was enough of a trauma to make you split to begin with. Now, sometimes those are not as traumatic or as big of a deal as you might think. Sometimes those are just, this happened when I was 5 and I was not emotionally or psychologically ready to handle it, and now that I'm 30, I'm able to. So we go back, we get the soul piece back, you understand why it happened, you can cope with it, it's not a big deal. Other times, it's something that happened when you were 25. I see this often with people's first heartbreak. Some people never get over those first romantic heartbreaks, or the loss of a parent, or the loss of a child, or a bad car accident. When you go back there alone without a practitioner, what happens is you can get wrapped back up in those emotions, you can get wrapped back up in those experiences, and that can be more damaging. It can also be something that you have a very hard time recovering from, if you recover at all. So, soul retrieval, I highly recommend you find a trained practitioner that you trust, who is experienced. Shadow work, you can sort of sometimes do it on your own. The only thing is that can be very intense as well. When I actually provide training for people to do shadow work on their own in one of the workshops that I do. And at those workshops, I provide the emergency suicide hotline number. Now, I've been teaching that this is 2016, so about 6 years. I have never, to my knowledge, had someone actually need that number. However, it's good to have a support system available because you're dealing with a lot of emotion. It's also a good idea to have that number with you in the event that you do need it. It's one of those things that's better to have if you need it than have and not need and it not be a big deal, So can you do it on your own? I wrote down the questions you guys said. What is shadow work? What is soul retrieval? We did that. How can they benefit you? We did that. When are they appropriate? I think we explained that a little bit. To go a little bit deeper with that, everyone has shadow work to do. Not everyone needs to do soul retrieval work. Now, I guess you could say that's an opinion statement, but what I have found is there are practitioners who call certain things soul retrieval. They're actually shadow work. Soul retrieval happens when an incredible trauma has happened. We're talking about things like rape, domestic violence, and of course physical traumas like car accidents and things like that. I think everyone can benefit from doing shadow work for at least a year, either with a practitioner or alone. Not everyone is really ready for soul retrieval, and frankly, not everyone needs it. So when are those appropriate? Can I do them on my own? We covered what resources are out there. Okay, here's the thing. Because the jury is still out in a lot of ways about whether these things should even be common knowledge for people to do on their own, for people to mess around with and end up hurt, I don't know any reputable practitioners releasing techniques to do this. I know a lot of amateurs doing some of that, specifically with shadow work, not soul retrieval. Primarily because soul retrieval is something that is taught after you really know what you're doing with some of their stuff. Those are practitioners who are experienced enough to be responsible to know not to share that knowledge with the public. So, as far as resources, if you're interested in shadow work, check out the workshop that I offer. Also, take a look at some of Jung's work on healing the shadow. There's actually a lot of material out there about healing the shadow self. That's something that you can look into. There's books, there's websites, there's all kinds of fun stuff. Yay. Soul retrieval. If you find resources on that, I would not trust them, is all I'm going to say there, personally. That's a personal statement. I have not bumped into any resources that... I've seen it in a couple books, and I've seen it come across Facebook and on the websites a few times. But it's generally people who don't understand what they're talking about or haven't done them, haven't actually done that work, or they think they did that work, but it really wasn't that kind of work. It was actually shadow work. I would recommend you find a practitioner for that. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye-bye.